The Derek
Diamond
Experience!
Welcome to another episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and if you haven't yet, be sure to check out this past Monday's episode where I had the pleasure of chatting with actress Amber Doig Thorne, one of the leads from the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey horror film. Really fun chat. Be sure to go back and check out that episode, and you can do so by heading over to linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast. That's your one-stop shop for everything Derek Diamond Experience related. If you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast feed, or to social media, just head over to linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast. But for this extra episode this week, I'm going to be chatting with actor Tommy Ryan. And he starred in a short film that's going to be featured at next week's Gulf Coast Film Fest and Social called The Third Division. And I had a lot of fun getting to know Tommy a bit better than I already have, getting to hear about his military background, what made him want to transition from that into acting, and of course his time on set of The Third Division. Really fun chat. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. So without further ado, here is my chat with Tommy Ryan. Happy to be joined with my special guest this week, actor Tommy Ryan. Tommy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Derek, and yourself?
Doing great. We were just talking before we started. This is actually your first podcast that you've ever done, which is, on one hand, it's exciting, but then I'm like, okay, now there's no pressure for me to try and make this a good experience for you. So
I'm sure it'll be a good experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you and I met when you auditioned for the feature back last summer. And I remember, you telling me and Chad a little bit about your backstory with, you serving in the military and now you wanting to pursue acting. And I knew, even back then, I'm like, I've got to have this guy on my show because you just seem like you have a really fascinating story. And I've loved the conversations that you and I have had, as sporadically as they may have been. I've had fun getting to know you in the few times that we've talked. So let's start from the beginning. You've served in the military for many years, but how did you get into acting after that? What was it that drew you into that specifically?
So I've always been a fan of films. I loved everything about them. And one of the things I found myself doing more often was, if I rented a DVD or a movie, I would watch the making of it before I even, started watching the movie. And the thing that I noticed most about watching that part of the DVD was it just seemed like they were always having fun. Like they just seemed like it was a blast, and I in the back of my head, it was always there. That would be a really cool job, but I didn't put much thought into it. I didn't, it was a dream. And I was like, that's just not for me. It was something that was not there. But while I was in the military, I was stationed in England. I was a military police, but in the Air Force, they call it security forces. It was security police, then it went to security forces, but it's the same thing. It's military police. And I ended up getting pulled into doing a year's worth of undercover drug work. And I knew nothing about it. I didn't know anything about drugs other than the few that I would find on a traffic stop and stuff like that. But the guys that my handler is the best way to describe them, that they said, this is what we want you to do. They gave me a crash course on it and I kind of jumped in and I did it for a year and it was all improv. I had a minimal cover story about who I was and what I was doing. And then I kind of had to make up the rest myself as I went. So I did this for a year and it was, there was some cases where it was dodgy. I found myself cornered in a bathroom once with 6 guys and they figured out that I was a cop in the military. And the guy that I was actually after was there at the time. And I just improv'd and I said, yeah, I am a cop. I said, how do you think I've been getting away with this for the last, 8 years, which was total BS, but I managed to talk my way out of it and continue, dealing drugs and buying drugs from these guys, over the course of the next 6 months or so. So in the end, it was really successful. There was a huge bust in the end, and they ended up it was like $10 million in drugs, and they rounded up people all over the place. It went as far as Germany. It was a really big deal. But anyway, so when I got out of the military, I got out, and that was probably 1999, 2000, somewhere in there. But I got out of the military in 2012, and I was convinced that I made a mistake. I shouldn't have got out, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know anything other than how to be a cop in the military. And a friend of mine said, in passing, "Why don't you be an actor?" And I said, I just laughed. I said, "What? That's crazy." And he said, "No, think about it." And he reminded me of the drug work that I did. And he said, all of that was improv. You talked your way out of some dodgy situations. He goes, maybe that's your next thing. So I stewed on that for about another 2 or 3 years, and then I found myself in Florida, and that's another story. But anyway, I found myself in Florida, and Northwest Florida State College had a really good acting program. So I used the GI Bill, and I put myself through acting school, and I took script analysis and stage combat and acting 1, acting 2, sociology, auditioning, stagecraft, just everything I could get my hands on. Ironically, I did not take improv.
That was going to be my next question.
No, I actually didn't. I started it, and I was in one class for it, and then I was told by the faculty that it was no longer covered under the GI Bill, which was very strange. But they later revoked that and then made it. It could be a class that I could take, but I didn't actually take improv. And as soon as I got the courses that I wanted under my belt, I ended up teaming up with my acting coach, who was my acting teacher, Darla Briganti, and she introduced me to Anne Marie Crouch, and Anne Marie Crouch took me to showcasing in Atlanta to secure an agent, and it just kind of blew up from there. Like, it just took off, like it just went out of control. But that's it. That's the highlights of basically how I started and where I'm at now.
That's just such a fascinating story, because I have to ask, with you going back to the situation where you were cornered by all these guys and you were able to talk your way out of it, did you in a way look at it as, well, I talked myself out of this, so this acting thing is like nothing compared to that? Because that's a true life or death situation. So yeah. Did that almost kind of like renew your, like, did you come back to that whenever you were acting, you were thinking, okay, well, if I can get myself out of this, then I can do this acting thing, no problem?
Yeah, you're absolutely dead on. If I think, if I'm looking at, if I'm on Actors Access or Backstage or whatever, and I'm looking at different roles and I'm thinking, could I play this role, or, should I submit for it, or, and then I end up looking at what they want for the script, the little bit, the side that they give you to do a, a self audition, and there's like a whole bunch of dialogue, and I'm like, could I do this? Could I do this? I always think to myself, well, yes, I can, because this is nothing compared to what I've already found myself doing. So, this is just acting. Like, if I screw it up, I'm not going to get killed. So it's not, so you are right. I do think back, if the role that I'm looking at is not as hard as what I've done in the past when I was doing that work, then it should be a piece of cake, and then, so that doesn't always work that way. Some some of the scripts got a lot of dialogue, which is probably my biggest weakness, but I worked through it. My memory isn't what it used to be, but repetition fixes that. You just keep going over it, and eventually you'll get the lines,
Has that been the biggest challenge for you since you've transitioned into acting, as far as like, because there are different facets of the acting process? Has the dialogue been the biggest challenge for you, or what has been the biggest one for you?
Yeah, the dialogue is definitely my biggest challenge. I feel comfortable with my body movement, my hand gestures, my facial expressions, what I'm looking at, where my eye line is. Like all of that almost comes naturally to me. I don't have any problem with it. I'm good with it. But the lines is what kills me. And sometimes, my acting teacher, Darla, she'll point out, you're not acting. I can see you're searching for your lines in your head. I can see your eyes moving. You're looking for your lines, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Just usually when I'm doing a self tape with her, and she catches me doing it all the time. But yeah, it's just, I don't want to put fault on anything, but my memory was like super sharp back in the day. And I'm pretty sure it's just, I just got my bell rung and I racked one too many times. And I think my short-term memory kind of sucks. I mean, I can tell you what I had for breakfast, on a specific date 20 years ago, but I can't tell you what I did this morning. Like, it just blows my mind, But yeah, so the dialogue is, but Anne Marie and Darla, they teach me techniques to memorize the lines. I just keep at it. They keep telling me, if you are the character, the lines will just come to you. The lines are the least important thing. It's the character that you need to find, and the rest will just come to you. So I just got to get into that mind frame, that mindset, and I think I'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and to talk specifically about both Darla and Anne Marie, it's kind of crazy to think that when this show first started, they were some of my guests the first year that I was doing the show, and they're still helping actors, all these years later. And I tell people, like, if you want to get into acting and you're in the Northwest Florida area, those are two people you want to get to know, because I've heard, and granted, like, I've only taken a handful of acting classes, but I've heard enough about them and I know them well enough to know that everything I've heard about them is true. Something I am curious about, you mentioned going to like an actor's showcase in Atlanta. I've seen those promoted on like Facebook and whatnot over the years. What exactly do those entail? Because I've been kind of curious about that myself.
Yeah, so Anne Marie and Darla, they put these showcases together, and they'll, that when they advertise them, they can get anywhere from 4 to 8 local actors that are interested in doing it. There is a small fee because there's a lot of things that have to be put into place, place for us to stay, and and then the agents themselves that are going to show up. But once she gets a team together, it's usually to Atlanta, New York, LA, or some. I think New Orleans was one chit chat once, but it's usually to one of those locations because those are the hot spots right now, And once we get there, she between the two of them, they put everything together, and they get these agents. The top agents in Atlanta were there, and it was very personable. It was very her Anne Marie's idea of doing it in we did it in an Airbnb right there in the living room. And they were all sitting on the couch, and we had, snacks and stuff for them and everything. And they felt very comfortable. They looked very comfortable, and we came out and we did our side, or, the scene, if we had a scene partner, and we did it in front of them. And then after that, it was like a sit down chit chat with each of them. And then from, once it was over the course of the next few days or the next few weeks or whatever, they'd start reaching out, and they're like, hey, I'm interested. And that's pretty much how it takes off. And, I think everybody, almost everybody gets picked up. Somebody gets teamed up with somebody. I didn't hear any bad news about anybody. I think everybody was happy with the results. They're awesome. I mean, the showcase is the way to go. Those showcases are the ticket. That's your foot in the door for an agent. I don't know why more actors don't, there's new actors don't do these showcases. Yeah, it was very cool experience. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine that almost like hands-on experience of actually auditioning in front of an agent is invaluable, because there are great classes that you can take, not just for acting, but for, writing, directing, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't replace the actual experience of doing it. Yeah. So that sounds like a really cool opportunity for actors.
Yeah. And I tell anybody that, any local actors out there, if they're not on the Emerald Coast Film Group, on Facebook, if they're not part of that, they'll miss it because that's where they're advertised. She'll post that on there, and that's that's a huge step, is the agent process, and that's your ticket to getting that done. You got to get on that Facebook group and just keep reading, because yourself, there's tons of stuff on there. There's always something. There's like PSA meetings are popping up, and there's even casting calls. Like casting calls pop up in it all the time. Yeah, it's very easy to get into the industry with that, just with that one connection, the Emerald Coast Film Group. It's very easy to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been the go-to place to find information, whether it's film news, casting calls, like you said, or meetups. That's
Absolutely
the place to go. Like,
yeah.
If you're an actor, but you say don't care for Facebook, still sign up for it and just use it for that page. Like, that's how valuable that resource is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's how I've got both my shorts cast, how I've been involved in other shorts has been through that page specifically.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's talk about the Third Division. So this is a short that you starred in. It's going to be a part of next week's Gulf Coast Film Fest and Social that we're putting on.
Yeah.
But it was also part of a red carpet event at Northwest Florida State College a few weeks ago, which was a really cool event. And I haven't really talked about it on the show, but I thought it was a really cool thing for us filmmakers to be a part of and get to see each other's work on a giant screen. And we did a Q&A afterwards. The Third Division was one of the films that was shown, and I was blown away by it, specifically by your performance. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you through Zoom, but I thought it was really, really good.
I appreciate that.
So how did you hear about this project, and what made you want to be a part of it?
So I saw the project on Backstage, and I had paid the yearly subscription, so I was submitting for stuff. And then when I read the synopsis of that movie, I jumped at it because I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm a member of the CVMA, which is the Combat Vets Motorcycle Association. And one of the big things that we do is vets helping vets. And we deal with a lot of vets who have PTSD. And a lot of the guys that are in CVMA have a rating for PTSD through the VA. And I, like myself, I have the same thing. And when I read this, I thought, I could do this. Like, I can do this. This part was meant for me. I mean, it was a World War II vet, yes. But the film was shot for the 70s time frame, so my age fit into that category. I didn't have to be older for it because it was a 70s setting. There was footage, there was B-roll that was ran. The old ring pole beer cans were on the table and stuff, but it never made it into the final cut. So but there was a lot of stuff, and you can tell by the television, a huge big box that weighs like a Volkswagen, like it was set back in the 70s. So I auditioned. I submitted my headshot, and I didn't have a reel, but he wasn't requesting a reel. The director, Chad Foster, was he's a film student with Belmont University up in Nashville, and the little bit that I read, I fell in love with it, and I grabbed my phone and I stuck it on the floor on a tripod, on a low tripod on the floor, and I just started freaking out in my camper, crawling around, and what I did was I played some battle noises, machine guns, bombs and stuff going off in the background kind of thing, and I just started low crawling around, and I was just hyperventilating, and there was a scene in there where it calls for a rifle. He gets a rifle and he gets into position, he aims it at the door, and it was maybe about 30 seconds, and I sent it to him, and like the next day he sends me a message and he's like, I love it. You've got the part if you want it. And I was like, I'm in. So about a month later, I drove up to Nashville. We shot that whole movie in one day. The house that we used was on the Nashville, on the Tennessee Film Commission Board or something like that. So they were very strict about what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do in the house. And we shot it in one day. And the funny thing is that my acting teacher, Darla, she'd be the first to tell you not to, if you're going to to develop that character and be careful about how you go about doing it. And I totally ignored her, and I ended up making myself extremely sick from hyperventilating to shoot those scenes, because all the scenes were me freaking out. It was the character freaking out, except for the very first one where he walks up to the television. So I was constantly hyperventilating, constantly breathing hard, and tightening muscles, and and all this, and I ended up making myself like ridiculously sick. And he told me, he said, "Don't puke in this house." He was like, "Do not puke in this house. Whatever happens." I was like, "I won't. I'll make it to the bathroom." And so there were scenes where I'm in the middle of the scene and I just took off. I had to run to the bathroom. It was I just went a little overboard with it, and I probably shouldn't have. And Darla scolded me a little bit about it. She's like, I told you, that's called method acting. You just don't want, you need to be careful with that, So, but overall, I love the experience and I love doing it. And I'd work with Chad Foster again any day, easily.
And there's one specific shot at the end of the film when you're hugging the other man who comes into the house.
Yeah.
And there's a close up of your eyes, and your eyes are just bloodshot. And you told the story at the Q&A that it was because you were so sick, and the director was like, "No, I want that shot."
Yeah.
And I don't blame him, because I would have done the same thing. Yeah. But that's like, I looked at my wife when that shot came up, and that's what sold it for me, because something I learned early as an aspiring filmmaker is that actors, like, you tell the biggest stories with your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that sealed the whole performance for me.
Yeah.
Because there's so much emotion was in that. The shot was like 2 seconds long, maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But so much story was told in that one shot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I didn't judge him for it when he said it. He's a director, and he the directors have a certain vision about what they're looking for, and sometimes actors don't have that same. They're not privy to that information. They don't know what the director's looking for, what they see. So when he saw my eyes, and he was like, get in the hug position, and he pulled the cameraman around. He was like, get right up on him, right on his face, get right up on him, and we shot that. He was ecstatic about it. He loved the shot, and he was like, "Are you good?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good." But yeah, I loved it. I can't say one bad thing about the whole day there. He had a small 5-man crew, and these guys were, they were on top of their game. I mean, because yourself, you don't shoot a movie chronologically. You shoot what you can, where you can, and a lot of the times they were catching, the sun. The sun wouldn't have been there at this time of the day. It would have been here, because this is where he was at this point, so they had to pull blinds and then set up, lights to mimic the sun to recreate that time of day. Otherwise, the sun would be in the front of the house in the morning, and in the back of the house in the afternoon, and in the front of the house again in the morning, for later on in the day. So they were very sharp. They were very meticulous. They didn't miss anything. I'd really work with Belmont again. I think they put out a really good product. And Chad Foster, I mean, he's listed as the director, producer, and writer of that. He loves military genre. Unfortunately, due to the school rules, we weren't allowed to actually show a firearm in it, so we worked around that. And that was the scene where you saw me kind of raising up my shoulder. It gave the impression that I was holding a gun without actually showing one. And then the crosshairs, is what sealed the deal on that. But they were a top-notch crew. They really were. These guys were really good. And that his genre, that's what he loves to do. He loves to do military stuff. Although he said his next project's going to be a horror movie, so we'll see what happens with that.
Maybe he'll incorporate a little bit of military aspect into it. Make it like a military/horror movie.
Yeah,
you never know.
Absolutely, I'll be down with that.
And I think what was another thing that was impressive about the Third Division is, it's not a very long movie, and like you said, you guys shot the whole thing in one day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more of a challenge to tell a compelling story in 3 to 5 minutes, because like my movie's 20, so like it has a pretty decent amount of breathing room. The fact that you guys were able to tell such a powerful story in like 3.5 minutes is like it's. I say every movie's a miracle because of the amount of manpower and willpower it takes to make it happen.
Yeah.
But to tell that kind of story in that short amount of time was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. I mean, there was. I remember doing a lot of stuff that didn't make it into it. We did shoot. There was a lot more. There was more dialogue for me, yelling, get away from my door," stuff like that. And ironically, I remembered that dialogue from the script after a couple of days after I got back to Florida, and I called him and I said, "Hey, do you remember that this dialogue of me yelling to get away from the door?" And he was like, "Oh my God," he was so bummed. He said, "Is there any way we can get that?" He goes, I can, I'm still in the editing process. Is there any way we can do that?" And I said, "There's a lot of people down here. I'm sure I could find a sound crew." But I was already slotted to do another movie in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and that was a movie called To Be. And I said, "I'm going up to Tuscaloosa in a day or two. Maybe their sound guys might be able to hook us up." So I asked the director, her name was Ali Weinstein, and I said, "Hey, a fellow film student needs some help with his. Is there any way you can hook?" She was like, "Absolutely." So me and the boom operator and the sound guy went into a small room and they recorded me yelling, "Get away from the room!" And but they put it on a jump drive for me and everything. And I brought it home and I sent it to Chad, and it still didn't make it in the movie. Like, he still couldn't fit it in there because those film students, they have a certain amount of time, and it was shot in color, but they had to show it post-production in black and white. So, because that was,
I think it was better for it that it was in black and white.
Yeah, I think so too. But I would love to see it in color. I'm going to try to see if I can get a copy of it in color, because that bloodshot eye shot part, would really, it would come out a little stronger, if you saw that in color. Because I looked at the footage after we'd shot it, and it was really good looking at it, with the bloodshot eyes, in the color format. But yeah, I'd love to get a color version of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what's next for you? Do you have any other projects currently lined up that you're working on?
Yeah, I just got what did I just get? I just got a script from our buddy Steve Wise. I still need to take a look at that. I don't know when that's shooting, but I still need to do a self-submission for that. I submitted for a couple of commercials. I don't know. I haven't heard anything back on those yet. So, I mean, they're slow, and then like all of a sudden, like everything kind of blows up, and then it slows down again. But yourself, that's the industry. I mean, you could go 3 months without hearing anything, and then 1 month you've got 4 different locations to be, and one every week, and it just gets out of control. You just got to stay on top of it, So I don't have anything other than Steve's flick, the commercials I'm just waiting on, and probably the next couple of days I'll probably jump on Actors Access and take a look, see, maybe submit a couple more things and see what happens.
Fantastic. Do you have any social media or anything you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
I do have an Instagram account. I'm not very good at it, but oh God, I can't even remember what the name of it is. But I think it's either Tommy Ryan or Tom Ryan. It's one or the other. I think it might be Tom Ryan. Yeah, so I do have the Instagram, and strangely enough, I started it up, and people just started jumping on and following. I tried to post the Third Division on there, and it only took like the first 10 seconds of it. So I got to figure that out, because I really wanted that on there so people, it would help the following, if they saw the movie. But other than that, I have my Facebook account. I'm not huge on the social media. It's still something that I mean, I know enough about Facebook to get me into trouble, but I don't know enough about Instagram. I'm still learning that process.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat. This was great.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Derek. Anytime.
Thank you again to Tommy Ryan for that unbelievable conversation. Again, the Third Division will be a part of the Gulf Coast Film Fest and Social next Saturday, May 27th at Hellcat Hangar in Pensacola, Florida. Check the show notes where you can find the ticket link, or you can head over to facebook.com/SoDiamondEvents to find out more information about all the festivities that'll be going on next Saturday. And we're going to continue the discussion on Monday's podcast with a behind-the-scenes look of Home Policies, which will be premiering at the Gulf Coast Film Fest and Social next week. I'll be chatting with writer-director Nick Smith, as well as two of the actors, James Poole and Thomas Carter Rochester. Really fun conversation. Be sure to come back for that fun episode. And if you want to subscribe to the show, whether it be on YouTube or on the audio form for the podcast, head over to linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast. It's where you can find all the information on where you can subscribe, as well as how you can follow the show on social media. And if you could, please leave a review. The more reviews I get, the more visible the show becomes to the podcasting public. And there's just a few days left in the Best of the Coast awards that are being done by In Weekly, and the Derek Diamond Experience is in the run for Best Podcast. You can head over to linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast, and there's a link where you can vote as well. But that's going to do it for this fun episode of the Derek Diamond Experience. Thank you once again to Tommy Ryan. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and we'll see you guys back here on Monday for another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast.